So what's up, Mr. Brett? Is this time of year you coming off hunting season, which we all love to hunt, right? But you always got to keep your eye on the prize. You always got to stay innovative. What are you doing right now as far as Benelli goes? Are you in constant communication with Italy? Are you already strategizing for 2025 because 24 product is already going to start being delivered to your dealer base? How does that work when you are in charge of product development for the best shotgun company in the world?
Sure. So right now, believe it or not, is honestly crazier than hunting season. Um, it all starts off with really that overlap between the end of hunting season where we're all doing our best to get our last few hunts in and the start of show season with SHOT Show. So SHOT transitioned this year directly into SCI, and then there was a little bit of a break before NWTF, and then you have Pheasant Fest, which was up in South Dakota this year. That was 2, 3 weekends ago. It's all kind of a blur at this point. And then I actually literally just got back from Italy on Friday night, so
So
I was
you went,
over there.
wow,
Yeah,
that's
it's
nuts.
uh, it's a lot, but it's part of the game. We know show season is the first 3 months every year, so you kind of prepare yourself for it. And then to your the second part of that question, we're in constant communication with Italy. But I would say that the meeting I just got back from, being over there all last week, is probably the most important meeting of the year because it's where we're finalizing the groundwork for 2025, um, and then taking the next step to what will launch in 2026. So projects that we had put in place 1, 2 years ago, we're kind of at the point now where we're go no go for 26, in terms of just timelines being viable and whatnot. And then that's the meeting where we're really laying the groundwork for 27, 28 as well.
Before we get into some specifics on product, Mr. Brett, what is your exact title? Tell our audience what your exact title
Sure.
is.
So I am the senior product manager for Benelli USA. So I I run the day-to-day activities for the Benelli brand in the United States.
So when you start talking about the product part of your title and then working with Italy and communicating with Italy,
Mhm.
does anything wow you anymore? Have you seen it all already, Brett? Or do you go over there and you're just like, you got to be kidding me. Like we're really going there. Like it's amazing what has happened from the Super Black Eagle series, right? From the 1 to the 2 and now the 3. When I thought they couldn't make the 2 any better, now for sure there's no way they can make the 3 better, but then they hit us with the 20 gauge and then they hit us with the 28 gauge and does anything wow you? Is your jaw on the floor over there or does it just become daily work for you now?
So, let's ignore the food for a moment, right? Because that's always a wow experience over there. But they're always finding new ways to innovate in a way that we didn't see coming. So I'll give you 2 examples of that. The first is without a doubt the new advanced impact barrel technology. We launched this year at SHOT. It's really a complete reimagination, re-engineering of shotgun barrel ballistic technology in a way that I think will truly be revolutionizing or revolutionary, regarding how we are able to utilize shotguns. So we launched it this year in 12 gauge. And if you look at that 12 gauge barrel, it actually looks like a 10, right? It's a wider bore. And when you compare it next to a 12 gauge, or like the standard 12 gauge, it's kind of jaw dropping is not the right word, but it makes you step back for a second. And then you start to find out what's going on internally. Um, and what that is it's not back boring, right? It's not a length enforcing tone. It's it's kind of everything wrapped up into this almost elongated hourglass shape that creates a pressure bubble in the middle of the barrel in a safe and reliable manner, of course, that increases velocity coming out of the barrel, which ultimately then increases energy on impact when compared to a standard 12 gauge using the same loads. And so, Italy saw this in being used in other industries, right? It's literally how a jet engine works, right? And it's how you can increase the pressure with liquids as well. And so they saw this and they ended up applying it to shotgun technology. And the in practice in the field, I was really kind of blown away this past hunting season.
Blown away, not literally. Blown away in a way of, with the added velocity, the muzzle velocity out of the muzzle. What more did we need? Because I've been shooting big Canada geese and mallard ducks from distances of 15 feet to 35 yards pretty consistently for the last decade. Let's just say for the last 4 or 5 years with the Super Black Eagle 3, and our shooting systems were fine. So now what can a shooter expect when he pulls up on a flock of mallards at 35 yards? Is this meant for duck hunting over decoys? What is this AI technology? Now, do you call it AI technology? Like you hear that a lot in today's world, but what do we call this, and what can a shooter expect? Because you just used the words blown away. Were you blown away by how fast the birds were dying? Were you blown away by getting on the second and transitioning to the second shot and getting them at 40 yards? Like what blew you away about it? And what is AI? What do we call this?
So we're calling it advanced impact technology. So when you go out and you look for a Benelli shotgun that features its technology, it will be Benelli AI. Now that happened to coincide, obviously, with the mass, I think, blow up of using AI in common parlance because of computer stuff. So, take that for what it's worth. But it's not, obviously, we're not talking artificial intelligence technology or anything. But what really floored me about it was kind of everything you said. I was shocked by the lack of cripples, right? Pulling up on a bird at 35 yards and it just absolutely dumping out of the air. I was shocked by longer follow-up shots. And what really wowed me was on the last testing hunt I did for this past season in Montana. It was I was out there I was in Montana January 7th through 11th, and we had some really adverse wind conditions where the birds were they were not working, and so they were coming in and the wind was pushing them up. They weren't able to land because of the backdrop, how we were set up on the second and the third days. And so we were having to take some, fairly aggressive shots on ones and twos, to the point where it ceased to become we're calling sort of the group shot. And if you think you have a shot, take it, right? And we still ended up limiting because people knew their shooting ability, and were able to utilize these guns this barrel technology in a way that we normally wouldn't, right? Like I had some shots at, frankly, 45 yards, 50 yards, where birds were crumpling just like they were at 10 to 15 yards, because I felt confident enough in my ability to hit out to that distance, and confident enough in this barrel technology based on what I had previously seen, where I had no questions about it being ethical versus not. And then post-hunt, what was really eye-opening is that you actually get better meat preservation, right? Because of the added velocity, because of the extra energy on impact, you're not getting pellets lodged in the meat, right? It's passing super cleanly through breast meat, and lodging inside the internal organs. So you almost start to look at it like you're talking about big game ballistics, right? Like what it does to the internals and causing, a whitetail to collapse on impact. You're starting to see the same effect on birds, but it's leaving you with this incredibly clean wound channel that even with a plucker, you're not getting degradation of meat. It's not ripping the meat up when you're plucking it. It's not ripping the meat up when you're skinning the breasts out. So it was very surprising. It was a very positive experience, on the back half of the hunt, and we ended up taking literally a lot more meat away from all these hunts as a result.
So on the ethical side, Mr. Bret, when you're talking about that added velocity and that impact, that crunching effect, which is what we want as a waterfowl hunter, we want ethical shots. We want them dead. We don't want cripples. They do happen. Sometimes you do have to wring a neck. Your dog brings it back, and you just have to. You have to dispatch it fast. That's our job as a hunter and a conservationist. If there's a cripple on the water, we kill it now. We get it out of its misery. So my question to you is, when you start talking about that ethical part of the meat and the bounty, you saw zero evidence of too much. Like, you're not like, okay, that's too much. It was like, wow, this is what we need right there. It was crunching them and they were dead, and it wasn't tearing up that bird to where when you picked it up, you're like, oh, this thing looks like it either got eaten by my lab or went through a meat grinder before it got back on my strap. Yeah. Was there any of that at all?
Not really, no. Not my experience. And I was shooting. So over the course of this past season, I shot exclusively an SB3 with one of these barrels, and my experience was from shots as close as 10 yards to shots as far off as 60 yards, clean, ethical kills, and not overly tearing the birds up by any means.
So when you go back to that added velocity in that, Talk to me a little bit about recoil now and what you saw in the performance into that with a shotgunner and a waterfowl hunter transitioning. That's a big part of shotgunning, is staying down on your gun and being able to get to that second target and not letting the gun, blow you back too much. Did that added velocity do anything with the inertia system added in with the Super Black Eagle inertia technology? Was there anything that you saw there?
Honestly, nothing that made me sit back after a volley of shots and be like, oh crap, right? You've got to look at it from the increase in velocity, the increase in energy. It's over a length of distance in comparison to traditional 12 gauge barrels. So the extra energy, the extra velocity at muzzle is single digits. We're talking 4 to 6% increase from a standard. What this does, though, is it shortens up the shot string in a way, and it causes the pellets to leave the muzzle in a way where it's maintaining that extra it's maintaining velocity longer, right? Which allows it to have more energy on impact further out. So as I'm taking shots, because the extra velocity at the muzzle isn't extremely high compared to a standard, it's fairly negligible in what you notice. But what is really the jaw-dropping aspect is how it allows for the velocity of the shot string to maintain compared to a standard the further out you go.
So the shot string is being maintained, meaning that if you do have a 35, 40-yard passing shot left to right, right to left, that bird's flying into a more consistently formed shot string that has more BBs and pellets in it at that time because of this extra velocity that they're getting out there and staying together. So that my next question that comes up, Mr. Bret, is when your team put this on paper in a patterning board, what were you seeing in a 30-inch circle at 20 yards, 25 yards, 40 yards? What was the patterning looking like? Because I imagine if the shot string's there, that at 30 yards, the impact of the 30-inch circle is awesome, right? Like, were you getting great patterning out of this?
Yeah, all results that we've done and that Italy has done shows very consistent, very solid patterning at all distances. And so you're gonna you know, is the pellet count going to be, when you're doing a stationary shot on a patterning board, going to be a whole lot different? No, because the shot string doesn't matter, in that moment. But what's amazing is when you do a penetration test at those distances, is how much greater penetration you get from more and more pellets compared to a standard, right? And I think there's, I'm not a scientist, right? But I think there's almost like a drafting effect, similar to like auto racing, right? Where you see this condensed on stop motion, slow motion cameras, right? You see this condensed shot string. And I think it probably lends itself to almost like a drafting effect. And I think that's what allows that greater penetration and that greater maintenance of velocity.
So before we get off of the new technology, myself and Benelli has had a long withstanding partnership with Federal Premium, which have added some new brands to the family with Heavy Shot, Remington. Did it make a difference in ammo when you were seeing this effect and the killing effect of this gun, the harvestable ethical shots that you're saying before, Mr. Bret, at 35, 40 yards, no cripples? Did it matter with the ammo? We don't have to mention any ammo, but were you getting pretty good results out of every? Because I assume you were testing different ammo also.
Yes, I did. I would say that the vast bulk of the ammo that I tested worked incredibly well. There were some outliers there, as there is with any firearm, right? So obviously, I would always encourage your viewers, your listeners to do patterning up front. Make sure what they're shooting gives you the results, at least on a pattern board, that you want. I can say that I shot a lot of black cloud steel out of these guns. I shot a lot of heavy metal and heavy shot out of these guns, and those all performed incredibly well.
When you start talking about this summer going into fall and what's going to be on the dealer shelves, Benelli has a lot of dealers all over the country. The dealer base means everything to the team. What can a customer in a dealer base, these associates, are they going to be educating the customer now that this is the future of Benelli, Mr. Bret? Or are they still going to have an option for a regular barrel? Or will all Super Black Eagle 3s come with this new barrel technology?
So we made the conscientious decision this year for the launch to launch in primarily sporting configurations, actually. So what you'll see is this technology having been put out there in the Ethos Super Sport Performance Shop model, the Ethos Sport Performance Shop model, and the Ethos Cordoba Performance Shop model. And we did that because the obviously, as I mentioned earlier, we're planning in 2, 3, 4 years out increments, right? So the first thing we did, because obviously it's easiest and it's not season specific, is do a lot of testing on sporting clays courses with clays in general, various places, and the impact that we saw there was unbelievably solid. So that led us to make the decision early on. Well, we're going to launch this in sporting-based configurations. Predominantly, obviously, the Cordoba is kind of a hybrid sporting hunting configuration. And then going forward, you will start to see some more hunting or some purely hunting configurations coming out for Benelli utilizing this technology. So what you'll start to see over the next 3 months is those 3 Ethos base model performance shop configurations start to hit shelves. But we will obviously have our full-fledged lineup of standard barrels as well. So, this technology for us it's the pinnacle right now. And that's how we want to treat it, which is why it is specifically in those performance shop models utilizing the Ethos platform.
Okay, so before we move on to the Ethos, I want to go to what I would say is probably the number one sought-after shotgun in waterfowl hunting. This is the Fowl Life podcast. we have my main man, Bret Maffett. He is the senior. You are senior product. This means that you're the boss, right? When it comes to product of bringing in these guns into America and making sure that they're ready to go to market. You obviously are the guy that is representing Benelli USA over in Italy. Of we are ready for these products to come to America, be tested, and then go to market. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that is a fair statement.
Okay, so Mr. Bret, when we talk about the SBE, the Super Black Eagle, there's a lot of customers that have written into me after I have podcasts with my Benelli family and say, we want more evidence. We want more science. We want more, ask the harder questions, not really like trick questions, but just maybe I haven't done a very good job of figuring out exactly what inertia is and how it's different than a gas module or a gas operated shotgun. What are shims and what is the advantage of a shim package that comes in a Benelli? There's a lot of things that are in this Super Black Eagle 3 package with the weight difference, the trigger compartment, the sleeker design of the forearm. Can we go back, Mr. Bret, and talk about the Super Black Eagle 3 and why Benelli settled on this for their new, for their new shotgun platform for the everyday duck and goose hunter? I'm not saying that you can't use an ethos. I'm not saying that you can't use a super sport out there. I'm saying this is the gun for all duck and goose hunters, in my opinion. Let's start with this question, Mr. Bret. Are the 20 and 28 designed on the exact same platform as the Super Black Eagle 3 when it comes to a lot of that stuff I just mentioned?
The feature sets will be the same. That is correct. They were all modeled after the 3.5-inch SBE3 that we launched in 2017. That said, they are very deliberately and specifically built onto 20 gauge and 28 gauge frames. So they are 28 and 20 gauge framed shotguns.
When you start thinking in your position, answer me this in what we call the sub-gauge revolution. You just said something that kind of brought me back a few years. You said 3.5.
Yeah.
Do people still shoot 3.5-inch chambered shells? Should you be shooting a 10 gauge if you're shooting that? And do you need a 3.5-inch, or do you just need an M2 platform to where it's just 3-inch? But now with all of this mindset of like, well, gosh, with the ammo, you can kill a turkey with a 410. Is this all true? Or where do you stand as the senior product developer at Benelli USA, Mr. Bret? Like, we should be shooting a 12 gauge, shouldn't we? Or am I way off basis by saying that?
It depends on the individual largely. I can tell you that by far and away, our number one selling platform, without any hint of a question, is still the 12 gauge 3.5-inch Super Black Eagle 3. That will continue to be the flagship. I think people want to know. I think they recognize that there are hunting scenarios in which they would want 3.5-inch shells, right? It's not going to be all the time, but I think they want the ability to shoot those should the need arise. I can't tell you how many people who purchase them are actually shooting 3.5-inch shells. But I can tell you that more so than any other gun, any other platform in our portfolio, we sell by far and away the most of the 12 gauge 3.5-inch configurations. Now, me personally, I'm a 20 gauge guy. I love 20 gauge. I think it's because it's what I grew up on. It's what I've always shot. And so are there instances where I'm using 12 gauges? Yeah, absolutely. I was using them all this past year because I was testing this new technology. Would I take a 20 gauge to a late season goose hunt? Probably not. But if I have my choice of what I want to hunt with day in and day out, it's going to be a 20 gauge for me, but that's a very personal, it's personal question to an extent. I think there absolutely is a sub gauge revolution. But I do think it's, from what I see from a POS data standpoint, from a knowing our internal sales standpoint, I think people are buying it for specific hunting purposes, and not as a 90% general hunting use firearm. I think people want, I think people are finding they want to have multiple options in their gun safe, in their gun closet, based on the type of conditions that they plan to hunt in on any given day. And I think they want to be able to switch it up. I mean, you mentioned 410 for turkey hunting. My God, does it work, and does it work well? Some of the patterns I've seen at 40, 50 yards with a 410 TSS load, mind boggling. But there are still plenty of people that are going to take a 12 gauge out there, still get a TSS load, and kill the turkey just as dead. You know, obviously, as firearms enthusiasts, I think we're well known for wanting to buy a new gun all the time. So I think there's probably a degree of that as well. That goes back to, yeah, I want to have various shotguns in my safe for various hunting conditions, but also that's cool as shit. I just really want that.
Yeah, because it's like a collector now. It's like a whiskey collector, right? It's almost like,
yeah.
I'm gonna have them all. So let's go back to my question about inertia. With all of the manufacturers that are out there, and there's a lot of guns that have killed ducks for years. We could talk about many historic models that have gained a good reputation in the duck blind, the goose pit. Why do I want an inertia gun over a gas operated gun? I would think that this is one of the most asked questions about the Benelli brand is, why would I even want it? What does inertia make a difference? Is it easier? Is it more accurate? Why do I want inertia?
It's cleaner and it's inherently going to be more reliable. Are the two primary reasons why I would tell you, or why I prefer, and even before I was working for Benelli, to say why I preferred shooting in an inertia gun. So the heart of the inertia bolt, the bolts can look very similar to a gas bolt, right? But if you take that inertia bolt apart, what you're going to find is this incredibly high gauge, high tension spring inside of it. And so what that does is it uses the initial recoil of your shoulder, of the gun hitting your shoulder. It creates a back and forth kind of slingshot effect within the bolt. That is what, you know, obviously the shot's going to push the bolt back, but that inertia spring, is what's going to then sling it back forward, right? Or I'm sorry, excuse me. Let me back that up. So the return spring is going to sling back forward, but what makes it work is the compression of that spring. So you get, and there is a lot of science behind this, and it can be kind of hard to understand. You have to have a person's shoulder, a person's body move for the inertia bolt to work. If I took an inertia gun, I took a 3.5-inch Magnum load, put it in an SBE3, held it up against this wall and pulled the trigger, it would not cycle. All right. Which is why you can sometimes get very large frame guys who will buy a sub gauge SBE3, a 28 gauge, and they will have cycling problems. It's not because there's anything wrong with the gun, it's because their body doesn't move enough to compress that spring to allow it to operate in the manner in which it's designed. So what's unique about it is because you don't have gases from a gas system blowing back into the bolt face, effectively pushing it backwards after you fire a shot, you don't get the buildup of residue, of powder, of potentially oils and whatnot into the operating system or the chamber of the firearm, right? The inertia system does it incredibly cleanly. And so all of the gases, all the fouling, everything stays from the front of the bolt face up into the barrel compared to a gas system, right? So you have to have gas blowback to make it work. So you are going to get a much higher degree of reliability as a result, because you don't have potential fouling conditions within the operating system. Does that make sense?
You what?
Does that make sense?
100%. And my first question after that, hearing that, would be: is the old ideology or rumor that you don't have to clean a Benelli chew. Now, look, I know that every situation in hunting is different. You might drop it in the water. It might fall when it's on the tree hook. Anything can happen. But when you're talking about that system of inertia and the cleanliness of this system without the particles and the debris from a gas-operated system, is it better to leave your Benelli dirty and operating like that? Is it kind of like an old Louisville Slugger bat, the pine tar's on there and it's worn in and you want it that way? Or should you be taking it apart after every hunt and cleaning it?
Listen, obviously we always recommend that you practice standard maintenance with your firearms. We outline stuff in the manuals that come with guns that we recommend. Do you need to clean it after every hunt? Absolutely not. Now, are there parts within your Benelli that you should be paying maintenance or paying attention to as far as a maintenance standpoint is throughout the course of your season or your year? Without a doubt. And that's because elements can be introduced into it that don't come from the powder burn within the shells, right? When you load up, into the magazine tube, there could be gun oil from just the way you store stuff. There could be anything on the shells. It could be dirt from when you drop them by accident into the dust of hunting or something, right? You can introduce that foreign matter into the receiver, into the operating system, just because of where your shells were, right? Or how they're stored or how they're handled, or where your gun's oily from lubing something up with your firearm prior to handling it, or even using a different firearm. You also have the return spring for the Benellis, which is in the buttstock of the gun. That has oil in it to help it operate. So over time, as with any oil, that can break down, and because of it being a contained environment, it can get a little stiff and may not move as well as you want it to. So again, do you need to maintain and clean those areas all the time? No, you don't, because this is an incredibly clean running gun. But there are maintenance points that don't have anything to do with where the gases go when you fire shells that you should always maintain to ensure proper operation.
When you go back to that inertia system real quick, please, Mr. Brett, and you talk about all of the choices in ammunition size, which we just talked a little bit about the 3.5 inch. How reliable is a Benelli Super Black Eagle 3 platform if I have a 3 inch in there and maybe another 3.5 and then followed by a 3? Or what if I have a 2 3/4 inch followed by a 3 followed by a 3.5? How reliable is this system depending on the size of ammo? I know you offer it in it, but can you mix and match ammo like that and watch it perform flawlessly?
You can. Obviously, there's always going to be certain watch points with the lighter loads. There, as with you can't have a giant frame dude shooting 28 gauge with light loads because it won't cycle. There are super light loads that may not run 100% of the time. They may run 50% of the time. It depends. So we do have a recommended load amount that you can find in really all of our communication on the website in the manual. That said, when we redesigned the inertia bolt for the Ethos system in 2012, we made changes to the bolt interface that actually allows for lighter shooting loads compared to your traditional and the original inertia bolt. So what was launched back in the 60s, late 60s, and perfected throughout the 70s, 80s, and really came to find a home and then ultimately dominate the waterfowl market in the US, that original bolt is actually not used in the new platform Benellis. So SB3, the Ethos, the M2 and Montefeltro refreshes from last year, they all use that easy lock-in inertia bolt that was redesigned for the Ethos launch. And as we've relaunched those platforms or upgraded them, refreshed them, that has been added to them. So it does two things. One, it allows you to shoot lighter loads. Two, it eliminates what I'm sure you heard of, which is the Benelli click.
The infamous
right?
Benelli click. Yep.
That's right. So you no longer can play a joke on your buddy by pulling his bolt out of battery in a blind if he's been annoying you all morning, right? It will, when you go to shoulder that gun, it's going to pop right back in the battery. So that problem that had been out there for a couple decades has been solved in, I'd say, 90% of the Benelli semi-auto portfolio, maybe even 95%. Some of the old legacy models that are still floating out there, like the Monty Silver Featherweight and some of the old M2 tactical guns still have the original bolt in them. But again, the Super Black Eagle 3, the Ethos, the new M2, and the Montefeltro refreshes that have all taken place in the last 12 years, those all feature that new easy locking bolt system, which negates the Benelli click.
So I can dove hunt with my Super Black Eagle 3 12 gauge now. Now there are some ammos out there that might be a little light.
Yes.
But I've hunted with my Super Black Eagle 3 consistently for dove over the last 10 years and have never had an issue with the lighter dove loads.
Yes. I go to this phenomenal dove field with a friend of mine down the road. His family's had it for years. And every year there's 2 or 3 SB3s out there shooting 12 gauge loads that are shooting great.
When you mentioned the 410 and the patterning, is that the reason why we may never see a 410, or could we potentially through the Benelli technology, or is it way too light with the inertia system?
It's not when I say this, and I mean it from a science of physics standpoint, it is not physically possible to build a 410 with an inertia system. And that's because the loads are far too light shooting to get the bolt to properly cycle. So if you go and you look at an Ethos 28 gauge or an SBE3 28 gauge, what you're going to see is every model always has a carbon fiber rib. Every mag tube is a little bit shorter. That gun, was purposely designed, and the bolt from a material standpoint is actually a little different than how we construct the 20 and the 12 gauges, because we had to get that gun light enough for it to cycle your standard 2 3/4 inch 28 gauge loads. And what the engineers R&D team has found is it's not physically possible to get a gun light enough to then cycle a 410 load. So unfortunately, it's just not going to happen.
Okay, well, let's stay with that sentiment real quick, and I'm going to ask a selfish question. Would you have the same answer, Mr. Bret, if I asked you, where's the left-handed guns, man? Come on. Like, are there just not enough of us out here? I love my 12 gauge, but my 20 gauges are M2s. Can I still get that gun, an M2 20 gauge left hand? If I can't, what can I get? I mean, can you let out a couple hints? Is there any secrets you want to tell our listening audience today? Are the Super Black Eagle 3s going to be released?
I can tell you, stay tuned.
Oh, wow. Okay, I'm going to take that as a maybe. I'm going to take that as...
That's probably a fair inference.
Okay, well, that's a big issue, because I remember like hearing about the ratio of left-handed hunters and shooters compared to the right-handed population out there, but there's a lot of us, man. There's a lot of us. So, I can't wait. Go ahead. Sorry.
Here's what's interesting. I think that the ratio is something like 10 to 12% of the American population is left-handed, somewhere around 10%, right? But what I've noticed over the last few years, and I'm actually a prime example of this. So I'm heavily left-eye dominant, but I'm right-handed. All right. I grew up shooting right-handed because that's how my dad taught me. And he shoots right-handed. It's actually funny because he's left-handed, but he's right-eye dominant, but never knew he was right-eye dominant. He was just taught to shoot right-handed because his father was right-handed. So I got taught to shoot right-handed. Or when I was 22, 21, somewhere in there, I got frustrated enough and I just decided on a whim to start shooting left-handed. A little awkward at first, but I made it work. Now I shoot exclusively left-handed because I am left-eye dominant. I bring this up because with all of the hunter education classes that are out there now, all of the firearm safety classes that are out there now, what we do when we teach these classes, and I say we because I teach them as well, is one of the first things we do is we teach people to identify what is their dominant eye. And then we encourage them to start shooting out of the gate on that side of their body. Obviously, doesn't always work for everybody. There's solutions if it doesn't work, but the vast majority of people, when they're starting a new practice, a new hobby like this, if they're taught the right thing out of the gate, it's easier for them to start shooting in a cross-dominant manner, which I think that is starting to push that ratio up, because people, as they're coming into this sport for the first time, are learning, I might be right-handed, but I should actually shoot my left hand because I'm left eye dominant, right? And so I think that's why we're starting to get more comments like that, more questions like that, why we're starting to get more and continued interest in left-handed firearms. And frankly, why every time I go to a trade show, every lefty in the world somehow finds me out and asks me for a left-handed gun, right? But I think that's part of what's driving the conversation too. So it's a fascinating, it's kind of a fascinating look at how the sport has evolved. But, again, back to your original question, stay tuned.
Well, now that I hear that, I would think that us lefties out here might have a little bit of an advantage with the senior product developer, the boss man of product at Benelli USA, shooting lefty. You might have a little bias in some of these decisions and these business meetings. Yeah, there's some bias here. We might have needed this on our team. So when you look at what you're saying real quick in your hunter safety classes and your shotgun shooting instructions to newcomers, maybe even a shotgun enthusiast that's been shooting for years, how does eye dominance, right or left eye dominance, come into play when you should be shooting with both eyes open? Does it make a big difference if I'm a lefty, but I played baseball, I hit left, and I was right eye dominant, so I always learned to hold my head like I would bite my jersey, like the famous Matt Williams on the San Francisco Giant. Everybody's like, why is he biting his jersey? Well, when I asked Matty that one time, he said it because it got his head straight to the pitcher with both eyes on that release point, giving that hitter another advantage because the pitcher has so many advantages from where he's at 60 feet, 6 inches away. Does this play into shotgun shooting as well when you shoot correctly with both eyes open, or should we be shooting with both eyes open? Is that just a myth, Mr. Bret?
No, you should always be shooting with both eyes open, without question. The reason for that is it gives you better depth perception, and it's going to give you better sight picture on your target. And that's really what we're trying to achieve when we teach people that they might need to shoot in a cross-dominant manner. And I say cross-dominant because I'm cross-dominant. I'm right-handed, but I'm left-eye dominant. So what it allows me to do is it allows me to get a cleaner look straight down the barrel. Down the rib, if you want to say. Obviously, we shouldn't be using the rib to aim. It's a reference point only. But when I go to shoulder a gun left-handed, I'm going to have a nice, clean, straight view down that barrel because I'm looking at it out of my left eye. If I go to shoot it right-handed, I'm going to be canted off to the side. Now, I could close my left eye, but that's going to reduce my overall sight picture, and it's going to reduce my depth perception. Can I still shoot well right-handed? Yeah, absolutely, I can, because it's how I grew up. But it's a much more natural point for an individual if they shoot on the side where their eye is dominant.
Okay, so now let's take that scenario a step further, and you have that Bret Maffett that shot right-handed his whole life, but you also have lefties that shot a right-handed gun their whole life. Mm-hmm. And when I see them and they're 40 years old, I'm like, what are you doing? Right? Because there are options out there. Talk to me a little bit about that, Mr. Bret. Like, what are the advantages of shooting a left-handed gun if you're lefty? I know, obviously, I'm playing the devil's advocate here a little, or whatever it's called, when I know the answer to the question, but I want you to explain it. it's way safer, right? It's way cleaner, but go into that. There are some holdbacks. Like, could the safety be a little bit opposite of what they're used to? Is it going to take too long to get to that? Is that dangerous? Talk to me about that incident.
Yeah, so I'll tell you the one thing that always drives me nuts, not the right word. The one thing that throws me the most about shooting a left-handed gun is actually the safety. Because I am so used to shooting a semi-auto right-handed safety. From a loading standpoint, it's the same. The bolt release button, when you go to load a shell, it's on the right side still. It's the same. What's great about it is you don't have a shell flying across your face. You don't have debris that may have been on that shell when the shell gets kicked off flying back towards your eyes. Now, the reality is shells flying across your face happen fast enough that's probably not going to throw you off a ton. But there is a definite safety concern there because if there is a catastrophic failure of a firearm, the upper receiver will always have a worse impact on the side where it's open, where it's ejecting from the shell, right? And so the safety concern or the safety benefit there is a left-handed gun and a left-handed shooter. The open part of the receiver would be facing away from your face, right? Now, have I ever seen something like that? No. But just from a hypothetical standpoint, that's always, as minuscule as it might be, it's always a possibility, I suppose.
It is, but let me ask you this: let's say that never happened. You can't teach an old dog new tricks is true, would you recommend a left-handed shooter that grew up his whole life shooting his dad and granddad's right-handed gun to switch over if he or she's so used to that right-handed model, the loading, the safety, the ejector, but everything that goes into it? What would you tell them?
I still shoot a right-handed model.
As a lefty?
Yeah.
Because of all those comfort levels that you grew up doing. It makes sense.
Shells flying in front of my face don't bother me anymore. And I own some left-handed guns. I like them. But what I don't like is getting so used to a left-handed model only that if I have to go somewhere and use a right-handed model, that it throws me off.
Makes sense.
So I've made the conscious decision that I'm not as worried about having shells flying across my face. I'm not as worried about debris from a shell kicking back toward. I'm normally wearing glasses anyways, right? Kicking back towards me. I can deal with all that. And the chances of a catastrophic failure are incredibly, 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 incredibly small. I can't stress that enough. So I'm not overly concerned about it. And again, for me, and this is part of my job, right? Like I get to go hunt in a lot of different places at a lot of different facilities. I have to try new products out of R&D on a consistent basis. So it would throw me off, I think, a lot more shooting a left-handed gun than exclusively than it would continuing to shoot a right-handed gun. Now, your average shooter, if they're always or 95, 90%, 85% of the time always going to have their left-handed gun, I absolutely get that, because you're going to like it better. But it's all subjective. It all depends on what you're going to do with it, how often you're going to shoot with it. If you're shooting predominantly sporting plays, something like that, yeah, absolutely get a left-handed gun, right? Because you're probably doing it. The majority of people who shoot sporting plays are doing it in local facilities around them, right? So they're always going to have their gun. I'm kind of I'm this sort of weird case because of my overall situation.
Yeah, it's a lot of people's case. I think I see it a lot. They're
Yeah,
comfortable. They're comfortable with it.
it is. There is an extreme comfort level, and that's not a bad thing. And again,
No,
it's all subjective. Like if I were brand new to the sport and I were just starting out, I'd probably go buy a left-handed gun.
me too.
But having been ingrained in shooting for, I don't know, 30 years, I just I don't see a need to fix it at this point.
And if you do make that step, here's what I would tell somebody how I did it when I was exclusively shooting Benelli and had the option of a left-handed gun. For a lot of years, I shot guns in manufacturers that I didn't even have the option. Shot some of the bottom eject system type models, but that was still different for me in the pump style and didn't really like it. So when I train handguns and my instructors teach me handguns, self-defense, home defense, how to get it out of my lockbox, fingerprints, I'm practicing. I'm practicing my breathing. I get my heart rate up. I'm shooting with a higher heart rate at 170. My adrenaline's pumping. And how do I stay accurate? How do I access my house with a flashlight in hand? Like all that stuff I want to train. It was exactly what I did with the left-handed shotgun. I would go out and practice for hours of the safety and getting used to that and not wanting to take that chance in the duck blind of having it on, having the safety off when when traditionally it was on in my other style gun. So you have to practice shouldering the gun, getting your cheek down on the gun. It's something that I still practice and I want to practice. So as a shotgunner, we're always challenging ourselves and off-season practice is huge in that. So if you do make that jump from changing from a right-handed model because you shot it your whole life and you want a Super Black Eagle 3 platform and left-handed, which there is a rumor floating around according to this podcast that we might see some of the sub-gauges in a left-handed model. Fingers crossed. But if you do that, practice day in and day out. Let's talk about best. Let's end our conversation today, Mr. Bret. Thank you for being on the podcast. Is best doing what you guys thought it would do when the Italians first brought it to the table? Are people taking, are they figuring this out? Are they looking at it like, wow, when I go to SHOT Show and I watch this development and I watch this field testing of what you guys did to test this technology, it's pretty amazing stuff. Is it doing what you guys thought it did? Is it performing like you thought it would or knew it would? And is the end consumer and customer base reacting to it like you guys thought they would?
So lot to unpack there. From a technology standpoint, purely technology standpoint, it is performing at our expectations without a doubt. There was a lot of testing that went into this technology. I believe it took them about 12 years to perfect it, to develop it. And we are seeing incredible results from it from a corrosion, scratch, as a pure resistance standpoint. I'll share with you the first test we did in the United States was actually about 200 yards that way. So I live on a tidal creek in Eastern Virginia. It's partially brackish, or it's brackish water. So what I did is I took a best treated barrel, walked out back, I tied it to a tree on the bank, and I hooked it out into the creek. And I left it there for about 3.5 months. I put it out. It didn't have a speck of rust on it. Sat there from mid-January till the end of April. Then for comparison's sake, I threw a standard mat barrel in the same creek for about 12 hours, and it came out just covered in rust, right? This technology, the best technology, is without a doubt the best firearms protectant on the market. And it is resonated in a way that, frankly, we're very grateful to see. We have great expectations going in, man, but we've had to triple our capacity since we launched it in 2020. It's resonated so well. Like people are loving it. They're recognizing it for what it does for their firearm. It's going to protect it for as long as they want to be running that gun. It is that good. I could tie it behind my truck and drag it down my gravel road, wouldn't have a scratch on it. It's unbelievable.
So the new technology, the AIT, Is it all treated with best and all of the selections that are going to be available in 2025? I mean, 24, I'm sorry.
So 24, the Ethos Cordoba is a best treated gun. So that AI barrel will have best on it. The Ethos Super Sport and the Ethos Sport have standard gloss blue barrels. So it'll depend on the model. But like I said, man, I'm glad you asked about it because it's pretty freaking awesome. And the reception has been unbelievable. Like I said, we've had to triple our capacity just because it's been that well received.
I love hearing it. I like it. I've been shooting my left-handed, which I got one in the best in 2020. Absolutely blows my mind of the performance of never rusting. It's pretty freaking. It's all. I mean, it's what every waterfowl hunter wants.
Dude, it's unbelievable. And listen, we've all had scenarios where our gun takes a dip in the drink, right? Or conditions are such that we've got to use it as a walking stick at some point, just because it's either that or you're going to fill your waders up. And it's just the peace of mind it gives you, unbelievable. It's
peace of mind. Great way to end this conversation. The motto at Benelli is simply perfect. But peace of mind is so important, in my opinion, Mr. Bret, of taking the responsibility of aiming a barrel downrange and aiming a firearm downrange to take an animal's life. It's a huge responsibility, and
absolutely.
And Benelli performs flawlessly, and it's so rewarding to have that confidence in the blind of my little friend is sitting next to me, and I know that in and out every day is going to be there and perform. And now you can add the best technology to the barrel and the metal parts of the gun to keep it from rusting because of what Bret just described of it could fall in the drink. It could have to be used as a boat handle someday to get out because your motor died, or a walking stick through the flooded timber because of all the stumps and you don't want to fill your waders up. There's all these scenarios. There's so much confidence in this brand. It's the best brand out there for waterfowl hunting. There's a lot of good shotguns. We're not going to say that all other shotguns suck because they don't. But there's something very special about the Benelli brand. I appreciate you being on here. Any closing words, Mr. Bret Maffett?
No, I got to tell you, that's how do I follow that? That's a phenomenal way to sum it up. And, obviously we appreciate your partnership and everything you do for us. And I'm incredibly proud to represent a brand that does provide what you just laid out. And if I didn't believe in it, I wouldn't use it. And I'm not just saying that. I could show you my gun safe. I won't, but I could. And it is what I use because it is the best. It's the most reliable. Provides you with the best peace of mind. We're out there to hunt. We're out there to harvest our own food, but we're also out there to make memories with loved ones and close friends and whatever. And, the last thing you want to be worrying about is having to field strip your gun on the side of a pond somewhere and ruining your day because it's not working. And the ability to be out there with the peace of mind that what you're going to do is make those memories with your grandfather, your great uncle, your dad. That's kind of what it's all about for so many of us. And having a tool that's going to get you there, it's invaluable. So 100%. I'm glad. I'm thrilled people recognize that.
And they will more and more. And there's it just writes stories. It writes memories. It fills your journal with unbelievable. Even if the birds aren't flying, the ones that you do get a chance to shoot, that's so enjoyable with the Benelli at your side. And you can check out Benelli for all of your sub gauges except the 410, 28, 20s. You can have them you can have them in hunting platforms. There's home defense models at Benelli USA. There's sporting clays. There's broke back over unders in the 828 and the 828 Sport family of guns. Benelli has mastered shooting, in my opinion. And I mean that because I shoot a lot and I enjoy shooting. It's not a job to me. I absolutely enjoy. I'm shooting sporting clays probably 8 to 10 times in tournaments this summer. Now I'm not a pro shooter, but my Benelli makes me feel that. And it's funny when I do show up at a tourney and just smoke somebody that's got that over-under that they're just so fired up to have. And I got my little Super Black Eagle 3 or my M220 gauge, and we go to work. I'm not going to say any names who I've put the boots to over the years, but hey, they perform daily on the sporting clay course. They perform in the duck blind, the goose pit. I love Benelli. It's simply perfect. The title sponsor of the Fowl Life podcast and the Fowl Life TV, which we're getting ready to air. Brand new episodes exclusively on the Outdoor Channel beginning late June, early July, season 16 of Benelli's The Fowl Life. Chad Belding, Bret Maffett. I'm so excited for the future episodes. Hang on one second, Mr. Bret, while I sign off. Thank you all so much for the downloads, the subscriptions. Tell your family, tell your friends, get a Benelli, save up. That's what I did. Go to the sporting goods store, look up there like a wide-eyed kid on Christmas Eve and go, I want to check that one out. There's not a better feeling in the world. For Bret Maffett, Benelli USA, Benelli Worldwide, I'm Chad. Thank you guys for being here for another episode of the Fowl Life podcast.